My mother-in-law tried to prove that I was unfit to be a mother, so I proved that she was unfit to be a grandmother instead. It all started when my 3-year-old daughter Emma came home from a weekend at Grandma Linda's with a black eye. She'd fallen down the stairs, Linda explained in the fake, worried voice she used whenever she'd been caught. That's what happens when kids aren't supervised enough. The accusation was clear. I was a neglectful mother. My husband, Jake, immediately sided with his mother. As always, Emma was awkward, you know. But Emma wasn't awkward, and the black eye was just like fingerprints. That night, I held Emma while she sobbed into my shoulder. "Grandma said mean things when I spilled the juice," she whispered. Then she grabbed my face really hard. My blood ran cold. The next morning, Linda called Jake at work. "I'm worried about Emma's safety," she said, loud enough for me to hear through the phone. "Sarah seems overwhelmed. Maybe Emma should stay over more often." Linda had been building her case against me for months, noting every scrape on my knee, every time Emma's hair wasn't perfectly combed, every time I seemed tense or distracted. She didn't know that I'd started documenting everything, too. When Jake suggested that Emma spend the summer with his parents, I knew Linda's plan was working. "It'll be good for her," he said, "and you could use the break." That's when I knew my marriage was over. But first, I had to protect my daughter. I made a decision that would change everything. The following Friday, instead of taking Emma to Linda's, I planted a hidden camera in Emma's favorite stuffed animal, the pink teddy bear she took everywhere. The camera was tiny, unnoticeable, and recorded everything for 12 hours. I dropped Emma off with my usual smile. "Have a nice time with Grandma, honey." Linda barely looked at me. "We'll call if there's a problem," she said coldly. 12 hours later, I picked up Emma and her teddy bear. She was quieter than usual, but Linda seemed pleased with herself. "Emma has been much better behaved today," she announced. "She's learning proper discipline." That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, I connected the camera to my laptop. What I saw made me physically sick. The footage began normally. Linda feeding Emma lunch, playing with toys. But as soon as Emma spilled apple juice on her dress, Linda's demeanor changed completely. "You're a stupid little brat," she hissed, squeezing Emma's hand so hard that my daughter screamed. "Just like your mother, clumsy and useless." I watched in horror as Linda dragged Emma into the bathroom and made her stand in the corner for 2 hours. When Emma cried, Linda yelled at her to shut up. "No one cares about your tears," Linda said. "Your mother doesn't want you. That's why you're here." But the worst came when Emma asked for water. Linda grabbed her shoulders and shook her. "What did I tell you about asking? You get what I give." Then she locked Emma in the guest bedroom for 3 hours. I could hear my daughter sobbing behind the door, begging to be let out. "Please, Grandma, I'll be good," Emma begged in her tiny voice. "You should have thought about that before you were such a brat," Linda replied through the door. When Emma wet herself in fear, Linda made her sit in her soiled clothes as punishment. "This is what happens to bad girls," she said. "Now you know how disgusting you are." I had to pause the video several times to vomit. This woman had been alone with my daughter dozens of times over the past year. The footage was horrific, but I needed more than one incident to build a case that would protect Emma forever. The following weekend, I sent out another recording device, this time sewn into Emma's jacket. The results were even worse. Linda invited her neighbor Margaret over, and they spent the afternoon criticizing everything about Emma, treating her like a science experiment. "Look at her posture," Margaret said, sipping her tea while Emma shivered in the center of the room. "Clear lack of discipline at home." "Sarah doesn't know how to raise a child," Linda agreed, stalking Emma like a predator. "That's why Emma needs to live here full-time." They made Emma stand absolutely still in the center of the living room while they pointed out her flaws in excruciating detail. "Feet together, back straight, chin up," Linda ordered. "That's how a lady should stand." When Emma's arms grew tired and she sagged a little, Linda spanked her hands with a wooden ruler she kept for these sessions. "We'll do this until you get it," she said with cool satisfaction. "Your mother never taught you proper behavior, but I will." They made her practice for an hour and 15 minutes. Every mistake was rewarded with a sharp smack or a harsh criticism. I watched my daughter's spirit break a little more with each cruel remark. "Look at those nails," Margaret observed, leaning close to Emma's shaking hands. "Filthy," Sarah clearly doesn't teach basic hygiene. Emma had been gardening with me the day before, helping plant flowers for Mother's Day. There were traces of dirt on her fingernails that I had missed while bathing. I've documented it all, Linda said proudly, pulling out a thick folder. Sarah's drinking, her mood swings, Emma's constant injuries. The courts will see what kind of mother she really is. Margaret nodded approvingly. You're doing the right thing. That child deserves a stable home with proper guidance. Oh, she won't be with Sarah for much longer, Linda replied smugly. I'm building a compelling case. Soon Emma will be where she belongs, with people who know how to raise children properly. They discussed my supposed shortcomings, forcing Emma to stand as still as a statue. Whenever she shifted her weight or scratched an itch, Linda would make her start the posture exercise all over again. Your mother is weak, Linda said directly to Emma, looking into her fearful eyes. That's why you have behavior problems. But I'm going to fix you. I'm going to make you a real little lady. Emma began to cry quietly, tears streaming down her face. Stop crying right now, Linda snapped. Real ladies don't cry over discipline. This is for your own good. That's when I realized the full extent of Linda's plan. She wasn't just trying to get more time with Emma. She was systematically destroying my daughter's self-esteem while building a custody case to steal her away forever. I found her records the following week when Jake asked me to pick up some papers from his parents' house for our taxes. Linda wasn't home, but Jake's dad let me into the home office. She keeps all her important files here, he said, pointing to a wall of file cabinets. The tax papers should be in the family folder. There, in a brown paper folder labeled Emma's Welfare, was everything. Photos of scrapes on Emma's knees, time-stamped and detailed. A leather journal documenting every time I looked tired or distracted. Screenshots of my social media posts that could have been taken out of context. Even photos of our house taken from the outside, labeled as unsafe. She even wrote detailed reports in the style of professional appraisals, with a form she created. Date: March 15th, 7:30 p.m. Sarah appeared drunk at Emma's birthday party, slurring her words and stumbling. Emma seemed embarrassed by her mother's behavior and sought comfort from other adults. Witnesses: several guests. I had one glass of wine and twisted my ankle in my heels while carrying Emma's birthday cake. Date: March 22nd, 8:15 a.m. Emma's clothes were wrinkled and mismatched, indicating neglect. The child appeared unkempt and tired, her hair uncombed and her face unwashed. Sarah seemed irritated when I pointed out Emma's appearance. Emma had dressed herself that morning while I was dealing with a work crisis, and I found her creative clothing choices charming. Date: April 3rd, 2:45 p.m. Sarah appears depressed and uninterested in parenting. Emma seeks attention from other adults, indicating emotional neglect at home. Child appears hungry and repeatedly asks for snacks. I was grieving the death of my father, and Emma was naturally outgoing and always hungry for snacks. Date: April 10th, 4:20 p.m. Emma was found playing unsupervised near the pool during a family gathering. Sarah was nowhere to be found. Child may have drowned. When confronted, Sarah became defensive and angry. I had been in the bathroom for 3 minutes, and the pool had a locked safety gate. The entries went on for pages, each one turning ordinary parenting moments into evidence of my unfitness. Linda had been watching and documenting our lives for months, taking photos through our windows, timing my every move, and interpreting everything through a lens of neglect. At the bottom of the file was a business card from a family lawyer who specialized in grandparents' rights, along with detailed notes about my alleged mental health and alcohol problems. She had even reviewed my medical history and found my prescription for anxiety medication after my father's death, which she had documented as evidence of my instability. But there was more. I found a folder labeled References, with a full collection of statements from people in our community. Linda had apparently been running a whispering campaign about my parenting for months, carefully planting seeds of doubt about my fitness as a mother. Mrs. Henderson at church. Sarah seems distracted during services. Emma often seeks attention from other adults. Baby seems hungry for affection, indicating emotional neglect at home, the pediatrician's receptionist declared. Sarah seems overly anxious during appointments. Asks excessive questions, indicating she is not coping with normal childhood development. Emma seems more comfortable with medical staff than with her mother. Even our mail carrier had been recruited. I have noticed the little girl often plays outside alone. Mother works from home but does not seem to provide close supervision. The child came to me several times, seeking adult attention. Every normal aspect of our life was used against me. Linda turned Emma's friendliness into evidence of neglect, my work-from-home schedule into negligence, and my natural parenting into an anxiety disorder. The most damning was the folder labeled Professional Evaluation. Linda had somehow convinced Emma's preschool teacher to document anxious behavior, even though I suspected the teacher had no idea how her observations would be used. Emma becomes anxious around loud noises and unexpected touches, the teacher wrote. She apologizes excessively for common childhood mistakes and seems intimidated by authority figures. These behavioral problems have become more pronounced over the past few months. These were symptoms of abuse, but Linda presented them as proof that I was being cruel, when in fact they were signs of Linda's own treatment of Emma. That night, I copied everything and began planning my counterattack. I realized I was dealing with someone far more dangerous and calculating than I had ever imagined. I researched Linda's past, something I had never done before marriage. What I found was both enlightening and horrifying. 3 previous babysitting jobs, all ending in mysterious misunderstandings with families. A neighbor's complaint about her treatment of her own pets, dismissed because of her impeccable reputation. Most damning, a sealed record from the teenage years of Jake's older sister Rachel, whom I'd never met but whom Linda described as unstable. As I dug deeper into the public records, I discovered a pattern. Every family Linda had worked with experienced some kind of crisis shortly after her placement ended. One family had gone through a bitter custody battle, another had dealt with CPS investigations, a third had seen their teenage daughter run away from home. When I asked Jake about his sister that night, his face went white. "Rachel doesn't talk to the family anymore," he said quietly. "Mom says she's unstable. She had some kind of breakdown in college and blamed our family for everything that went wrong in her life." "What breakdown?" I pressed. "I don't know the details. She started saying crazy things about our childhood, making up stories about Mom being cruel. The therapist said she had false memories or something." It sounded disturbingly familiar. Linda's pattern was becoming clear. She created chaos and then positioned herself as the solution. "When was the last time you talked to Rachel?" Jake shrugged awkwardly. "Maybe 10 years ago. She sent a card when Emma was born, but Mom threw it out. Said Rachel's influence would be toxic to the newborn. That she might try to fill Emma's head with the same lies she'd spread about our family. I hired a private investigator to find Rachel. She was living on the other side of the country under her married name, a school teacher with 2 well-adjusted children. When I called her, after introducing myself, there was a long silence. "So, you finally figured out who Linda really is," she said, her voice full of unsurprising resignation. "I've been waiting for this call for years." "I'm sorry to bother you," I began. "But I need to know about your childhood with Jake." Rachel laughed bitterly. "What version? The one Linda tells everyone, or what really happened behind closed doors?" Rachel agreed to meet with me the following weekend. I flew to Portland with copies of my video evidence and Linda's documentation, desperate to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Her story was heartbreaking and familiar. Rachel lived in a modest but cozy home filled with children's drawings and family photos. She was nothing like the unstable woman Linda described. "She broke my arm when I was Emma's age," Rachel said, showing me the medical records she'd kept in a safe for more than 2 decades. "She told everyone I fell off a bike. The doctor was suspicious. The fracture was consistent with someone grabbing and dislocating it, but Linda was so convincing. She cried and told me how awkward I was, how hard it was to keep me safe. The pattern was clear. Linda had abused Jake and Rachel throughout their childhood, then convinced everyone she was the perfect mother. The mental abuse was worse than the physical," Rachel continued, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. "The mental abuse was worse than the physical," Rachel continued, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. "She made me believe I was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted. She'd do horrible things to me, then the next day act like nothing had happened. When I tried to tell my dad or a teacher, she'd show me evidence that I was lying, fake journal entries in my own handwriting, photographs that seemed to contradict my story." Rachel showed me her own documentation, medical records from her entire childhood. notes from a college therapist, even a recording she'd secretly made of Linda berating her on the phone years ago. "Listen to this," she said, turning on the audio. Linda's voice was venomous, calling Rachel a pathological liar trying to destroy the family out of jealousy. "This was from when I was 22 and trying to get help. Jake blocked it all out," Rachel explained. "He had to do it to survive. She convinced him I was jealous of their relationship, that I was mentally ill and trying to destroy the family with lies. He was her golden child, as long as he never questioned her version of reality." "How did you break free?" I asked. "I didn't talk to them for 5 years. I went to intensive therapy. I built a life away from her influence. When I met my husband, I had to learn what a normal relationship looked like. It took me years to trust my own memories and feelings." She looked at my videos with growing horror and recognition. "This is exactly what she did to us," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The isolation, the criticism, the way she makes a child feel responsible for the abuse she's inflicting on Emma, that's what she did to me." "Will you help me?" I asked. "I've waited 20 years for someone to ask," she replied. Rachel provided me with detailed documentation of Linda's pattern of abuse, including the names of the families she'd worked with and the chaos that followed her employment. Together, we built a complete picture of a woman who systematically destroyed families while positioning herself as their savior. Armed with Rachel's evidence and documentation, I returned home and confronted Jake directly. "Your mother is abusing Emma," I said, showing him the video. He watched in stunned silence as Linda screamed at our daughter, locked her in rooms, and forced her to stand in wet clothes. I could see him struggling with cognitive dissonance, the loving mother he remembered versus the evidence before his eyes. "That's not true," he whispered, his face pale. "You edited it somehow." "Mom would never call your sister," I said, handing him Rachel's phone number. The conversation lasted 3 hours. I could hear Rachel's voice on the phone, gentle but firm, bringing Jake back to memories he had buried deep. She reminded him of incidents from their childhood, the times he hid in closets, the nights he wet the bed in fear, the way Linda had tormented Rachel and then comforted him, making him an accessory to the abuse. When he hung up, he was sobbing like a broken child. "I remember now," he said through his tears. "I remember hiding in the closet when she lost her temper. I remember Rachel trying to protect me by taking the blame for things I did. I remember being afraid to make her angry." He looked at me with broken eyes. "How could I let her anywhere near Emma? How could I not see it?" "Because you were trained not to see it," I said softly. "She spent your entire childhood training you to doubt your own perceptions, just as she is training Emma now." The next morning, Jake called his mother with shaking hands. "Emma is no longer staying with you," he said simply. Linda's reaction was immediate and explosive. "How dare you deprive me of my granddaughter?" she screamed, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. "You are both unfit parents. I have documents to prove it. I will take this child away from you no matter the cost." "We know what you did," Jake said quietly. "I was protecting this child from your wife's neglect," Linda hissed. "Sarah is mentally unstable, just like your sister. Emma deserves a real family who can give her proper guidance and discipline." "We're protecting her," Jake said, his voice growing stronger from you. "You poisoned him against me," Linda spat into the phone. "Just like that crazy sister of his filled his head with lies. I won't let you ruin another family." "I have proof, Jake. Evidence that will show everyone what kind of mother Sarah really is." She hung up and immediately called her lawyer. 2 days later, we had the papers. Linda was filing for emergency guardianship, claiming Emma was in immediate danger due to neglect and abuse at home. Her petition was a masterpiece of manipulation, full of lies and twisted truths that portrayed me as a dangerous, unstable mother and Jake as an absent, neglectful father. She claimed I was an alcoholic who drank during the day while caring for Emma. She said Jake traveled constantly for work and showed no interest in raising the children. She claimed Emma showed signs of severe physical and emotional abuse, including unexplained injuries, behavioral problems, and a fear of her own parents. She included photographs of Emma's common childhood injuries: scratches on her knees from learning to ride a bike, a bump on her forehead from crashing into a table, a bruised shin from playing with playground equipment, as evidence of our failure to protect her. Each photo was accompanied by detailed descriptions that transformed ordinary childhood accidents into evidence of abuse. The petition also included professional opinions from people in our community. Linda had somehow convinced several people to sign statements about my supposed unfitness as a mother, carefully framing their concerns so that they sounded like accusations but weren't outright false. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving me very little time to prepare a defense against Linda's years of carefully orchestrated actions. I spent the days working with our attorney, David Chen, a family lawyer who specialized in defending against false accusations. He was a soft-spoken man with kind eyes who had seen cases like this before. "It's more common than you think," he told me when we first met. "Abusive grandparents often project their own behavior onto the parents they're trying to discredit. They build false cases over months or years, painstakingly documenting ordinary parenting difficulties as evidence of abuse. I gathered my video evidence, Rachel's testimony, Linda's work history, and medical records showing a pattern of abuse across generations. Most important, I arranged for Emma to interview Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist who specializes in abuse cases. The interview with Dr. Martinez was heartbreaking. Emma, who had always been chatty and outgoing, became quiet and withdrawn when asked about her grandmother. She drew pictures that no 3-year-old should be able to draw, images of fear and helplessness that spoke of trauma that transcended her years. "Emma is showing classic signs of emotional abuse," Dr. Martinez told me after the session, "but she's also showing remarkable resilience. You've done a good job of creating a safe environment for her to process what she's been through." The hearing was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The courtroom was filled with Linda's supporters, people from her church, neighbors, family, friends who had no idea what she was really like behind closed doors. Linda arrived with her lawyer, dressed in a sharp navy suit that made her look like the perfect grandmother. She had even brought handkerchiefs and kept them prominently displayed on the table, ready for her introduction. She tearfully testified to Emma's alarming behavior and my apparent neglect, presenting herself as a reluctant whistleblower who had done all she could to help before resorting to litigation. "This child is screaming for help," she said, blinking back tears with practiced precision. "She comes to my house anxious and scared. When I try to comfort her, she flinches as if she's been hit. I have tried to work with Sarah to offer support and guidance, but she becomes defensive and angry when I raise concerns." Her lawyer methodically presented their evidence, photographs, documentation, witnesses who attested to Linda's remarkable reputation as a grandmother and community leader. The pediatrician's secretary took the stand. "Mrs. Morrison always accompanies Emma to her appointments. She asks thoughtful questions and clearly cares about the child's well-being. Sarah seems distracted and depressed, constantly asking about normal child development milestones, as if she doesn't understand her own child. Linda is devoted to this little girl," testified Mrs. Henderson of the church. "She is always talking about Emma's development and expressing concern about the home environment. She has mentioned several times that she is worried about Emma's safety." Even our neighbor testified against me. "Emma spends a lot of time outside unsupervised. I have seen her playing by the road while Sarah was home working on the computer. The child often approaches adults in the neighborhood, seeking attention." Linda's lawyer painted a picture of a caring grandmother trying to save her granddaughter from neglectful parents who were too proud or damaged to accept help. "My client was reluctant to come forward," the lawyer said in closing arguments, "because she feared for Emma's safety. The evidence shows a clear pattern of neglect and possible abuse. Emma deserves a stable, loving home with adults who can provide proper care and guidance." I watched the judge's face as Linda presented, trying to read his expression. He seemed sympathetic to her story, nodding in agreement with her testimony. My heart sank as I realized how persuasive she was, how perfectly she had constructed her case. Then it was our turn. David Chen stood slowly and addressed the court with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, we are here today because the plaintiff systematically abused her granddaughter while simultaneously creating a false case against the child's loving parents. What you are about to see will shock you, but it represents the truth about Linda Morrison." He played the first video. The courtroom went completely silent as Linda's harsh, cruel voice filled the room, a stark contrast to her tender testimony. "You stupid little bitch, just like your mother, clumsy and worthless." I watched Linda's face as her own words were played back. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw pure rage flicker across her features before she composed herself again. We played clip after clip, Linda yelling at Emma, grabbing her roughly, locking her in rooms, making cruel comments about her granddaughter's appearance and behavior. The contrast between the woman on the stand and the woman in the video was striking. The judge's expression grew darker with each clip, his earlier sympathy evaporating as he watched Linda's systematic abuse of the 3-year-old. "Your Honor," Linda's lawyer stammered, "these videos are clearly edited or taken out of context. My client was trying to provide discipline and structure." "Are you saying that's not your client's voice?" David asked. The lawyer didn't answer. The videos were clearly unedited, showing continuous footage of Linda's abuse. We played the audio of Linda discussing her plan to take custody of the child with her friend Margaret, her cruel comments about Emma's supposed shortcomings, her systematic emotional abuse designed to break the spirit of a 3-year-old. The room was silent except for the sound of Linda sobbing on the tape, not tears of remorse, but frustrated rage at a child who would not conform to her impossible demands. Then Rachel took the stand. She calmly testified about her childhood, speaking clearly about decades of abuse, maintaining her dignity. She showed the court years of medical records, injuries that couldn't be explained by routine childhood accidents, emergency room visits where doctors noted suspicious patterns. "My mother is very good at appearing concerned," Rachel said, looking directly at Linda. "But behind closed doors, she's a predator who systematically targets the most vulnerable members of the family. She ruined my childhood, convinced everyone I was mentally ill when I tried to get help, and now she's doing the same to Emma." Linda's lawyer tried to discredit Rachel during cross-examination, suggesting that she was unstable and seeking attention. "Ma'am, is it not true that you were estranged from your family for many years because of your mental health problems?" Rachel smiled sadly. "I was estranged from my abuser for many years because of her mental health problems. There is a significant difference." The child psychologist then testified, presenting Emma's drawings and explaining their meaning. "Emma shows classic signs of emotional abuse," Dr. Martinez said. "She flinches when touched unexpectedly, constantly apologizes for normal behavior, and exhibits severe anxiety around authority figures." She presented Emma's drawings from their sessions. When asked to draw her family, Emma drew herself, her parents, and a few friends in bright colors. When asked specifically about her grandmother, Emma painted disturbing images: a large, angry face with sharp teeth looming over a small figure, a little girl trapped in a box, a woman with claws reaching for a crying child. The child described feeling afraid and confused in her grandmother's home, Dr. Martinez continued. "She believes she is bad, and that is why these things happen to her." This type of self-blame is typical for abuse victims who are too young to understand that they are not responsible for the behavior of adults. "In your professional opinion," David asked, "who is the threat to this child's well-being?" "Absolutely the grandmother, Dr. Martinez answered without hesitation. "Emma has no evidence of abuse in her primary home. Her parents have created a safe, loving environment where she can freely express herself. The symptoms of trauma only appear in connection with visits to the plaintiff." Linda's attorney had no meaningful questions for any of our witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. Finally, David presented Linda's work history, the pattern of families terminating her services under mysterious circumstances, the neighbors' complaints that were dismissed because of her reputation, the systematic way she built false cases against. "Your Honor," David concluded, "this is not a custody case. This is a criminal case." "Your Honor," David concluded, "this is not a custody case. This is a criminal case. The plaintiff has committed systematic child abuse by attempting to steal a child from her loving parents through fraudulent legal procedures." The judge took a short break to review the evidence, then returned with a stern expression. "Not only is this petition dismissed in its entirety, but I am issuing an immediate restraining order," he said, looking directly at Linda. "Mrs. Linda Morrison is prohibited from having any contact with the minor child, directly or indirectly, for a period of not less than 10 years. He turned to the court clerk. "Please ensure that law enforcement is immediately notified of this order, and that copies are sent to the child's school and daycare providers." Then he looked back at Linda, whose face had turned from white to red with barely contained rage. "Your behavior, as documented in these records, constitutes clear evidence of systematic child abuse. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal prosecution. I am also ordering a full investigation of your past work as a guardian and recommending that your name be added to child abuse registries to prevent future work with children." Linda could hold back no longer. She exploded from her chair. "This is ridiculous!" she screamed. "I am the only one who genuinely cares about this child. These people have poisoned her against me with their lies and manipulations." "Madam," the judge said firmly, "you will sit down and remain silent, or I will fine you." Linda's lawyer grabbed her arm and tried to pull her back into her seat, but she continued to rave. "This child is in danger. Sarah is mentally unstable, just like Jake's sister. Emma needs proper guidance and discipline, not this indulgent nonsense that is ruining her." "Bailiff," the judge called. As the bailiff approached, Linda finally sat down, but her mask had slipped completely. "The image of the caring grandmother has disappeared, replaced by the cruel, controlling woman I saw on the video," the judge continued. "I've been on this bench for 15 years, and I've rarely seen such clear evidence of systematic child abuse disguised as care. The plaintiff's actions pose a danger not only to this child, but potentially to other children in the community." He paused, looking around the courtroom at Linda's supporters, many of whom now looked shocked and confused. "I want to be very clear about what happened here today. This was not a case of a loving grandmother raising legitimate concerns. This was a predator using the legal system to continue abusing a child while attempting to discredit the parents who protected that child from harm." Linda sat in stunned silence, finally realizing that her perfect plan had not only failed, but had destroyed her completely. "But I wasn't done yet. Outside the courthouse, I handed copies of the video to a local TV station and several national media outlets that were covering child abuse stories. Linda's carefully crafted reputation in our small town had evaporated overnight. The story ran on the evening news with the headline, "Respected Grandmother Caught Abusing Toddler on Hidden Camera." They interviewed Dr. Martinez about the signs of child abuse, showed selected clips from Emma's protected identity, and discussed how predators often pose as caring caregivers. Within hours, the story had spread across social media and was picked up by larger news outlets. Linda's Bridge Club issued a statement distancing itself from her. Her church asked her to step down from all ministries involving children. Neighbors who had praised her parenting skills for years suddenly remembered troubling incidents they had previously ignored or dismissed. 3 more families came forward with their own stories about Linda's babysitting. Children who came home upset or traumatized, explanations that didn't quite make sense, their own gut feelings that something was wrong but which they dismissed. Because of Linda's impeccable reputation, one mother, Jennifer Walsh, shared her story on the local news. "My daughter Emma, also named Emma, coincidentally, was 7 when Linda babysat us. She came home one night and said Linda made her stand in the corner for hours because she couldn't tie her shoelaces fast enough. When I asked Linda about it, she said Emma was exaggerating and that kids often make up stories to avoid consequences. I believed her because everyone said she was great with kids." Another family said their son was afraid to stay with Linda after she forced him to eat foods he was allergic to as discipline for being too picky. They changed nannies but never reported the incident because they doubted their child's version of events. The criminal case moved quickly thanks to video evidence, multiple witnesses, and Linda's outburst in court. The district attorney had a strong case. Linda initially tried to fight the charges, claiming the videos were edited and that she was the victim of a conspiracy. But when confronted with overwhelming evidence, including expert analysis that confirmed the authenticity of the video, she had no choice but to accept a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to child endangerment, making false statements, and perjury. She received 2 years in prison followed by 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory psychological counseling, and a lifetime ban on working with children in any capacity. The judge also ordered her to pay for Emma's therapy and issued a permanent restraining order that would apply to any future children in the family. "Your actions traumatized an innocent child and violated the sacred trust between a grandmother and granddaughter," the judge told her during her sentencing. "You used your position of power and respect in the community to systematically abuse a vulnerable child in an attempt to destroy her family through fraudulent legal processes." Linda stood silently during the sentencing, no longer pretending to be a caring grandmother. The mask was off for good. Jake took the revelations about his mother hard, but he remained committed to protecting Emma and processing his own trauma. We began family therapy together, working with a therapist who specialized in patterns of intergenerational violence. "I'd believed her version of events my entire life," he said during a particularly difficult session. "She convinced me that Rachel was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted, that questioning hers was disloyal to the family." Victims often protect their abusers, our therapist explained patiently. "It's a psychological defense mechanism that helps children survive trauma. You've been conditioned since birth to prioritize your mother's emotions over your own safety and cognition." Jake worked incredibly hard to deprogram years of manipulation and gassing. He began calling Rachel regularly, rebuilding their relationship and processing their shared trauma. Watching him reconnect with his sister was beautiful. They had a lot of healing to do together. Emma also began therapy specifically designed for young trauma victims, appropriate for her age. She learned that adults shouldn't hurt children, that it was okay to tell the truth about scary things, and that she was loved unconditionally no matter what she did. Her progress was remarkable. The nightmares stopped within a month. She began laughing freely again, the spontaneous, joyful laughter of a child who feels safe. The constant apologies disappeared when she learned that making mistakes was okay and wouldn't lead to punishment or rejection. "Grandma Linda has a broken heart," Emma told me one day while we were painting together, "but you and Dad protect me now." 6 months after the trial, we moved across the country for Jake's job transfer. A fresh start away from Linda's lingering influence and the small-town gossip that never dies. Even after the truth came out, Emma immediately blossomed at her new preschool. She made friends easily and showed none of the anxiety and hyperactivity that had characterized her behavior during the abuse. Her new teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled me aside after the first week. She said with genuine warmth, "Emma is such a confident, happy child. She stands up for herself, shows real empathy for others, and has excellent emotional regulation for her age. Whatever you do, keep going." If she only knew what we went through to get Emma to this healthy place. One night, as I was tucking her into bed in our new home, she looked up at me with big brown eyes that seemed too mature for her age. "Mommy, why was Grandma Linda so mad at me?" I chose my words carefully, as I always did when discussing the past. "Some people have illnesses in their souls that make them want to hurt others, especially those who are smaller and can't defend themselves," I said softly. "But it was never your fault. You're a wonderful little girl who deserves nothing but kindness and love." She nodded solemnly, processing it in her own 3-year-old way. "I'm glad she can't hurt me anymore." "She can't," I promised, stroking her hair, "and she never will again." 2 years later, Linda violated the restraining order by showing up at Emma's new school. Having somehow tracked us down, an alert teacher spotted her sneaking around the playground during recess and immediately called the police and administration. She was arrested within minutes and charged with violating the restraining order and attempted kidnapping of a child. This time, there was no plea bargain. She spent 8 months in jail and was released only to be immediately transferred to a mental hospital for evaluation. When she was finally released, she moved to another state. We have not heard from her since, although our attorney maintains a standing order to notify him if she ever attempts to contact us or find our location. Jake and I eventually divorced 2 years after the trial. The trauma had damaged our relationship too much to repair, despite our best efforts at counseling. We both carried too much guilt. He for not protecting Emma from her mother, I for not recognizing the signs sooner. But we co-parent successfully, united in our commitment to Emma's well-being. She feels safe and loved in both of our homes, and we have both done extensive work to ensure that we never repeat the patterns we internalized in our own childhoods. Emma is now 8, confident and happy. She engages in a variety of activities, has close friends, and shows no long-term effects from Linda's abuse. She doesn't remember much about her grandmother anymore, and that's exactly what we wanted. The child psychologist says that's normal and healthy. Young children often don't retain detailed memories of trauma if they are quickly removed from the situation and given the proper support to heal. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty for ruining Linda's reputation and family relationships. No, not at all. She made a choice when she chose to harm a defenseless child. She chose to systematically abuse Emma while simultaneously building a false case against me. She chose to use the justice system as a weapon to continue her abuse. I was simply making sure everyone knew who she really was. The fallout from Linda's exposure extended far beyond our immediate family. The state launched a comprehensive investigation into her past employment and discovered a disturbing pattern of complaints being dismissed or hushed up because of her impeccable reputation in the community. New legislation was passed requiring expanded background checks for private caregivers and mandatory training for all child care workers in reporting abuse. Teachers and therapists received additional training in recognizing emotional abuse disguised as discipline or care. Linda's case became a textbook example in child psychology courses of how predators use their reputation and social standing to gain access to victims. Several universities are now using our research to train future social workers and family lawyers. Most importantly, Emma has grown up knowing that she is valued and protected. She speaks up confidently when something is bothering her. She sets appropriate boundaries with adults. She knows that she deserves kindness and respect from everyone in her life. Linda tried to break Emma's spirit and steal her identity as a loved, worthy child. Instead, she made Emma stronger and more resilient. Last month, Emma came home from school excited to have a new friend whose grandmother was visiting their class. "Her grandmother seems really nice," Emma said brightly. "She brought homemade cookies for everyone and read us stories. She didn't yell at anyone or make faces." I am grateful that Emma has positive examples of what healthy family relationships look like. She deserves grandparents who celebrate her accomplishments, encourage her dreams, and love her unconditionally, not grandparents who try to destroy her self-esteem for their own psychological satisfaction. Emma still has one loving set of grandparents, my parents, who moved closer to us after everything that happened. They shower her with appropriate love and create the positive memories every child deserves. They have also been incredibly supportive of Jake, accepting him as a true son-in-law even after our divorce. Linda thought she could use my daughter as a weapon against me, positioning herself as the savior and me as the negligent mother. She believed that her reputation and meticulous documentation would be enough to take Emma away from her loving family. Instead, I used her own cruelty as a weapon against her. The truth was stronger than all her lies and manipulations. The best revenge was to simply let Linda reveal who she really was. Late at night sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and planted that camera. How long would Linda's abuse have gone on? What psychological damage would it have done to Emma's developing sense of self? The thought terrifies me, but I'm grateful every day that I acted when I did. Emma knows she is loved, protected, and valued just the way she is. She knows that adults who truly care about children don't hurt them, manipulate them, or try to turn them against their parents. She knows that when someone tries to hurt her, there are people who will fight tooth and nail to protect her. Most importantly, she's learned that her voice matters, that speaking up about difficult situations is not only okay, but necessary. It's a lesson that will serve her well throughout her life. It's a lesson that was worth all the pain we went through to learn, and that's how I learned that protecting Emma was worth tearing down Linda's entire facade of respectability. The truth always wins in the end.